Good morning, and welcome to our series on the human cycle with Kittu Reddy. Kittu, welcome. Where are we now? Where are we now at this point?
We discussed briefly, quite elaborately, the chapter called The Curve of the Rational Age, which leads inevitably at the beginning to the individualistic democracy. But then, as he says very clearly, that the progress of the, if we may judge from the modern movement, the progress of the reason as a social innovator and creator will pass through three successive stages, which are the very logic of its growth. First one is individualistic and increasingly democratic with liberty for its principle. The second is socialistic with the state for its principle. And thirdly, if ever that goes beyond the stage of theory, anarchistic with brotherhood as its principle. So, the important thing is there is no point in criticizing and finding fault with the socialistic system. It's an inevitable logical conclusion, second step in the process of reason. So either you have to go beyond reason, or if you are rational, it is inevitably going to be individualistic democratic, then socialistic with state control, and then, if we are ready, the third stage of anarchism, which is the one beyond it. So last time we discussed that when you are governing your life by reason rejects all tradition, all custom, all convention, questions everything. There is a universal questioning, and there is automatically a demand of the universal application of reason to life to solve the problems. The question comes, whose reason? And so there Aurobindo says it cannot be the reason of the ruling class because they will use it for their own interest. It cannot be the reason of the elite because nobody will be able to follow it. Therefore, it has to be the reason of all and everyone. That is the whole basis of what you call democracy today. We are allowed to use that reason effectively once in 4 or 5 years during election time. The rest of the time, newspapers, TV channels, processions and protests, it has some impact, right? And today it has a little more impact because of the social media. And a very important consequence of this is, in the age of reason, it is expected, it is presumed that every human being must be allowed to govern his life by his own reason without interfering in somebody else's life, which is also governed by reason. And it was believed that if this is put into practice, we will arrive at the ideal society. Because in this whole chapter, we are assuming that reason is the highest instrument. So if all of us become reasonable and live life according to my reason without interfering in your life, which is guided by your reason, right, we will have an ideal society. So Aurobindo says in practice it will not work.
No.
Because first of all, man is not a reasonable human being. He thinks according to his impulse, interest, desires. Secondly, he thinks according to those who are more intelligent than him very often. And thirdly, and this is the most serious defect, we do not use reason to come to an agreement, but we use reason to impose ours on others. Instead of sitting and trying to come to an agreement, I am right and you are wrong. The result is that the whole system fails. So you think that the solution to this is education, universal education. Give the whole world education. But a rational education means three things: capacity of observation and knowledge, capacity of intelligence and judgment, capacity of action and high character. So, observation and knowledge, intelligence and judgment, and character to follow what you have done. He says nowhere in the world, in no educational system, is this being done. So inevitably, there will be a failure. But Aurobindo is not so negative. He believes that it has not succeeded as well as we should have, but it has done something. For the first time in the history of man is erect, active and alive. And where there is life, there is always a hope of better things. So it is on this presumption that he is going to have it. But then there is something else which I have discussed last time. Despite all his reason, man is still infrarational in many parts. He demands three things for his satisfaction. All human beings: power, the use and reward of your faculties, and the satisfaction and enjoyment of your desires. So this is a very fundamental thing. All human beings are seeking some power. Whether it is the policeman who is controlling the traffic, or whether it is even a taxi driver. So he has some power, and naturally the scale goes on right up to the highest. The reward of one's faculties. If I am capable in something, I would like to express myself through that and get remuneration for that. If I am a good dancer, I would like to dance and earn money through my dancing, etc., etc., etc. And the satisfaction of one's desires, which all human beings have got. In older societies, these were given to you according to the status, because there was a status. If you are up there, you could get all these things. If you are here, you get very little. If you are here, you don't get anything. But today we have spread the ideas of freedom and equality for all human beings. So everybody wants that. So what was arranged by a system in society has now been open to every human being. The result is a fierce, competitive society in which the most successful are either the most fortunate, family background or anything else, or the most ruthless, those who can get things done. And this word getting things done can be interpreted in many ways. Right? So naturally there will be a war of classes. Formerly there would not have been a war of classes because nobody ever preached the idea of equality. Now you preach equality and then you suppress. Inevitably a war of classes. So Karl Marx's theory is based on this, because the haves have always exploited the have-nots. Inevitably a war of classes. Once this idea of equality comes in, you can't rest. You have to demand. So So then automatically it follows into socialism, and socialism automatically leads to state control, state government, and state government means always, except in that once in 5 years, a few people who are supposed to be representing the community who are dictating the whole, running the whole society. So always government today means a few people who are deciding for everybody else, whether you like it or not. So you can complain about Mr. Trump, but that's all that you can do. As long as he is there for those 4 years, either you have to impeach him and remove him, or you have to tolerate him, accept him, or be with him. There is no other way, right? So that is state control. The unfortunate or natural tendency of the state is little by little to take over the whole of life. And this was experimented in communism in Russia, when the state took over the complete control of the individual's life. Right? And if this continues, then the individual freedom will be completely snuffed out of existence. Right? And that's the most undesirable thing. So, in the next chapter, the end of the curve of reason, this theory of the state who is more knowledgeable, more intelligent, and getting the advantage of the guidance of the most intellectual people is the best way of doing things. Well, there is a little bit of truth in it, but the pity of it is that it is not wholly true. And that is where so why is it not true? There is a huge discrepancy between the ideas and the actual reality of human nature. For it ignores the complexity of man's being and all that complexity means. And especially it ignores the soul of man and its supreme need of freedom, of the control also of his lower members, no doubt, but of a growing self-control, not a mechanical regulation by the mind and will of others. See now, whatever the state of society, some control from outside is necessary, but ultimately it has to be self-control. See, that is why I think in many countries they try to stop drinking. Boomeranged. If you can persuade them that you should not drink and it is not good for you, then there is a greater chance of success, which means self-control rather than being controlled by others. Right? Yeah. So obedience too is a part of perfection, but a free and natural obedience to a true guiding power and not a mechanized government and rule. The next part is very important. The collective being is a fact. There is a collective being. All mankind may be regarded as a collective being. But this being is a soul and life, not merely a mind and a body. See, this is very important. The Aurobindo ashram is a collective being. It has a soul. It has also a kind of mind. And certainly it has a body. The houses, the assets. That is the body of the ashram. The mind of the ashram is not, I would like to say, what we all think, but what Aurobindo and Mother thinks, and I put it down in there, right? And behind that and above that, there is a soul of the ashram. So, not merely a mind or a body. But the society has no discoverable common reason and will belonging alike to all its members. So when somebody comes and asks me, what does the ashram think about this? I said, I have no answer.
Very difficult. Yeah.
Because what the trustee thinks, what this man thinks, what this man thinks, what this man thinks, they are all might be different. And they are all part of the ashram. The only time when I could have said that this is what the ashram thinks was when Aurobindo said something or the mother said something.
Yes.
Because we had surrendered our mental being entirely to them. So when they talk, it is as if we are talking through them. But today it is not so, and in no society it is so, right? So when you say India thinks or Russian things, the only thing that you can say is that the majority of India thinks in this way. Or those who are in power think in that way. Because they are the effective persons, right? So the society has no discoverable common reason and will. For the group soul rather works out its tendencies by a diversity of opinions, a diversity of wills, a diversity of life. And the vitality of the group life depends largely upon the working of this diversity, its continuance, its richness. This is the essence of democracy. Why is democracy right? Because of this. I can have an opinion about something, you can have a different opinion about the same thing, a third person has. Inevitably, the government has an opinion, but it has to take into account all this. If there is no diversity of opinion, the society will stagnate. It will die from within. So there have to be diversity of opinions. Therefore, freedom of speech and freedom of expression is extremely desirable. But of course, if the freedom is motivated by a lower vital impulse, then it is misused. But I have a sharp difference of opinion from what the government is doing, because rationally I am not satisfied, very desirable. And that is the role which in a parliamentary democracy the opposition should play. Not to oppose for the sake of opposing, but to oppose because they feel that many ideas have been dropped out. Some of them are probably impracticable, etc., etc., etc. But it has to be an honest mental difference. And it is most undesirable that everybody sings the same song. There have to be differences of perception, differences of understanding, because as he says at the very beginning, man is an extremely complex being. And that complexity has to be respected. You can't streamline everybody into a narrow framework, right? That is why government by the organized state always means government by a few. And they impose it on you. But fortunately, there are two correctives to this. The most important corrective is election every few years. And the second corrective is that there is very active, agitated discussion in the Lok Sabha, in the Parliament. And thirdly, there is the freedom of expression, which is often misused, but still one mustn't suppress it, allow it. And that which is misused will automatically die. Right? So this is the whole thing. So what Aurobindo says very clearly is man needs freedom of thought in life and action in order that he may grow. Otherwise he'll always remain fixed where he was, a stunted and static being. If his individual mind and reason are ill-developed, he may consent to grow without the freedom. But as individual reason and will develops, you have to give him an increasing play for expressing that reason and expressing that will. And for some time, the state might be giving you certain benefits by taking away freedom. You will enjoy the advantages, but after a certain time, that is not enough. You will demand your freedom of expression and freedom of growth, right? So, he sums up by saying this. On the other hand, if from the first freedom of thought is denied, that means the end of the age of reason and the ideal of a rational society. Man, the mental being, disallowed the use, except in a narrow, fixed groove of his mind and mental will stop short of in his growth and be even as the animal and the insect, a stationary species. So you see, this is the tremendous importance of freedom of thought. And freedom of thought inevitably will lead to freedom of action. Because I can't go on thinking one thing and do the opposite. I'll have to do what I think. Right? So this is a central defect through which an organized state will pass. And yet we need an organized state. Because you can't leave everybody to take his own decisions. Right? So, life differs from the mechanical order of the physical universe with which reason has been able to deal victoriously just because it is mechanical. Now, the only area where reason is 100% successful is in the material field. Because there the laws are mechanical and absolute. No variation. The moment consciousness emerges, the very fact of consciousness means some freedom has come in. And that freedom has to be allowed. As one goes higher and higher, and man, the highest in the present state of evolution, needs always freedom for his growth. Right? Otherwise, you will remain a stunted being. And the progress of life involves the development and interlocking of an immense number of things that are in conflict with each other and seem often to be absolute oppositions and contraries. To find amid these oppositions some principle or standing ground of unity, some working lever of reconciliation, which will make possible a larger and better development on a basis of harmony and not of conflict and struggle, must be increasingly the common aim of humanity in its active life evolution, if at all it wants to come out of this terribly confused state. This is the problem that man is facing today. So many contrary ideas. We have to sit together and work and find out what is. He has used a very nice word. A kind of reconciliating platform from which we can all work together. This is the work of the United Nations on the international scale. This is the work of every national government. In a big country like India and America, in America, even now you have mainly two parties. In India, you have a large number, all with their different points of view. We'll have to find some standing ground of reconciliation by which there can be a slow, progressive, harmonious development and growth. Otherwise, conflict, 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 conflict.
How does this include the mass of the men of lower consciousness that Mother talks about?
No, that is why in the earlier, before he said, universal education seems to be the problem. And seems to be the solution. If you give universal education, universal rational education, which he has defined as capacity of observation, capacity of analysis, and character. Right? You have raised the level of the boss to a much higher level. And if that happens, and when that happens, right, then we should be able to try to reconcile all these different viewpoints and come to some understanding. But that means really a fairly big change of human nature. Because we must not use our reason to justify my interests, my preferences, my desires, or just because I don't like you. Right? That will not do. We have to be more or less rational. And that is a difficult process. And when that does not happen, inevitably man tends, because state control means complete, so man wants to go to anarchism. And what is anarchism? By definition, anarchism is lawlessness. But there are two types of anarchism. There is a vital anarchism, where your feelings and emotions and your lower things run riot, total chaos and confusion. You see, the moment you say anarchy, in the human mind you think of disorder. But there is a higher anarchy, where each one is a law unto himself and yet perfect harmony. That's the spiritual anarchy. Intellectual anarchy can be there in a room. You can have your view, I can have my view, he can have his view, everybody can. Moment I want to put it down into practice, we cannot do all things, we have to do one. So if you reach this spiritual state, and that spiritual anarchism, right? And there have been many thinkers who have conceived of it, who have dreamt of it. And in Russia, I've forgotten the name, he distinctly believed that, dreamt of a future world where there will be no law and yet there will be harmony. And that is exactly what Mother would like to have in Aurobindo, and I am sure also in the Aurobindo ashram, where there will be as few rules as possible, where everyone is a law unto himself, but yet in harmony with everybody else. Right? That is the ideal state. So now, the question is it possible? Because this means a huge change in the level of the consciousness, right? And Aurobindo says very clearly that this is a solution to which it may be objected that it puts off the consummation of a better human society to a far-off date in the future evolution of the race. For it means that no machinery invented by the reason can perfect the individual or the collective man. An inner change is needed in human nature. A change too difficult to be ever effected except by the few. This is not certain. But in any case, if this is not the solution, then there is no solution. If this is not the way, then there is no way for humankind. He doesn't compromise. He doesn't try to come down to a lower level so that it is acceptable. If this is not the solution, there is no solution. We have to change our consciousness. We have to rise. No problem can be ever solved by remaining on the same level of consciousness. You have to go up. Might not be top, but above the level of consciousness at which the problem existed. And then it's a gradual process, right? So, if this is not the solution, then there is no solution. So this will inevitably lead you to seeing what is that solution. So that will lead you to the spiritual aim in life. So that is the next series of 4 chapters. he describes the spiritual aim of life. First, he describes the difference between a normal society and a spiritual society. Two very fundamental differences. And then, after explaining how the spiritual society may be formed, the necessity of spiritual transformation. Then, conditions for the coming of the spiritual age. And then finally, the advent of the spiritual age. It's a long process. And on the collective level of mankind or nation, it will take a very long time. That's why Aurobindo Ashram, Aurobindo, small centers of spiritual enlightenment, which if they can, they release a vibration, which will have its effect everywhere in the world. So, all spiritual organizations must be truly spiritual. But if they hide behind law and behind other kinds of things, then you might win, but the victory is making it spiritual, not winning on the legal plane. Basically, that's it.